Hello and welcome to our review of The Exorcism of Emily Rose. I'm Paul,
And I'm Dave.
and this is the second week of our Halloween movies. Third year for doing this. Dave, had you ever seen this before? Because you said you thought you might have.
No, with this one, after seeing from the poster, it brought some memories of things, but watching through the movie is like, oh, okay, no, this is new. Had supposedly heard word about it and somewhat recognized it, but not specifically the one I remember watching in theaters. Though I also can't remember what the title of that particular film was. Though it's similar, either with the exorcism sort of idea, or possibly maybe more on the movie camera horror sort of movie. Can't remember the franchise from it.
Okay. This movie originally was released September 9th, 2005, on a budget of 19 million, which I feel like for a horror movie in '05 was quite high. I feel like that was actually like a pretty significant budget. It brought in 145.2 million at the box office, so it was quite a successful little film. All right, so let's get into the plot. So, Erin Bruner is a ambitious lawyer seeking to become a senior partner in her firm. She takes on the case of Father Richard Moore. He's a Catholic priest who's charged with negligent homicide following an attempted exorcism of a 19-year-old college student, Emily Rose. While the Archdiocese wants Moore to plead guilty to minimize the crime's public attention, Moore wants to plead not guilty and proceed to trial. During the trial, the statements of witnesses are visualized via flashbacks. Prosecutor Ethan Thomas interrogates several doctors and neurologists to establish a medical cause for Emily's death, particularly epilepsy and schizophrenia. Emily had dropped out of her college studies after being consistently struck by delusions and muscle spasms at 3 a.m. She returned to her parents' home and was treated with epilepsy and psychosis medications. Moore was consulted when her condition failed to improve. And his assessment and observations led to the conclusion that Emily was being possessed by a demon or potentially multiple demons. With the
Hmm.
consent of Emily's parents, Moore subjected Emily to an exorcism that ultimately failed. Moore surmised that Emily's medications were to blame for the unsuccessful expulsion, as they paralyzed Emily's brain activity and kept the demon out of reach. Moore, wanting to tell Emily's story, gives his testimony when he is called to the witness stand. Brunner begins experiencing supernatural phenomena at home, waking up at 3 a.m. to the smell of burning material. Moore warns her that she may be the target for the demons, revealing that he too has experienced similar phenomena on the night he was preparing for his exorcism. Brunner supports Moore by summoning anthropologist Satira Adani, I think that's how you pronounce it, to testify about the beliefs surrounding spiritual possession from various cultures. But Thomas dismisses her claims as nonsense. Graham Cartwright, a medical doctor who attended the exorcism, gives Brunner a cassette tape on which the exorcism was recorded. Moore presents the recording as evidence. Cartwright's testimony to authenticate the exorcism and refute the prosecution's medical case is prevented when he is suddenly struck and killed by a car. A distraught Brunner retreats to her office, where her boss threatens to terminate her if she allows Moore to testify again. Brunner visits Moore in his jail cell, where he convinces her to allow him to tell the rest of Emily's story, despite her boss's threat. The next day, Moore takes the witness stand again and reads a letter that Emily wrote before she died. On the morning after the exorcism, Emily was visited by the Virgin Mary in a field near her house and was permitted the chance of ascending to heaven. However, Emily chose to endure her suffering and later received stigmata on her hands. Thomas does not interpret the markings as a divine sign, but rather as traces of self inflicted injuries. The jury ultimately reaches a guilty verdict, but surprises the court by asking the judge to give him a sentence of time served. Although momentarily shocked by the suggestion, the judge accepts it, and Moore is free to go. Brunner is offered a partnership in the firm but declines. Later, Moore and Brunner visit Emily's grave, and Moore states that the time will come when Emily will be declared a saint. The epilogue reveals that Moore never appealed his conviction and went into seclusion. Emily's story brought a profound effect on the masses, and her gravesite has become an unofficial holy shrine which draws visitors from all over the world. So, Dave, what do we think of this movie?
It was one of the particular cases that, with not somewhat knowing the basis of the film or understanding of what it made, was figuring it was going to be either a little bit more horror eccentric, but or um, fitting a little bit more in the psychological sort of things, but it kind of kept a nice balance between the two. Again, working with the basis theme of the spiritual devil worshipping sort of thing and more realistic and scientific sort of explanations for things that kind of went on, which was one of the interesting things I sort of saw. And somewhat content with the fact that with the first experiences that Emily ran through, that first thing that popped into my mind with how typical things have kind of been was the case of, oh no, it's going to be a rape story, isn't it? But was thankfully disproven on that, though. Also, wouldn't be surprised if that was another avenue that could have supposedly been taken.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I really like, because this is directed and co-written by Scott Derrickson, who's done a number of horror films at this point. Him being like a religious person, I think really actually helps this film because he does a very good job of balancing like, well, because the film never gives us a clear answer as to what happened, right? Like the priest is technically found guilty, but we never actually know if she's killed by this demon or if he was just wrong and she just had epilepsy and developed schizophrenia or whatever and died as a result of like self-inflicted injuries and stuff. I really like how he kind of balances that and gives both equal weight. Like it's like you can kind of decide for yourself what the answer is here, and I don't feel like he ever like tries to convince the audience of one particular answer.
That's definitely true, and it's one of the particular excuse me, the particular cases with it, especially with either going through courts or other sorts of things with there, that it could have easily devolved into crazy religious hearsay and other sort of things. And in certain cases, it's how especially one other word escapes me, but the other gentleman in the court did for running through all this sort of things. But it was still interesting to sort of see this still state the facts, air quotes, of everything that he experienced and had happen with the exorcism and other things from there. And again, just interesting, though, just as it kind of sat with things, the demons did one hell of a good job picking the particular place for all the stuff that happened. All the bloody cats.
Yeah, it is a creepy ass farmhouse. Like if you were to tell me
Yeah.
that a demon attacked someone there, I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
And again, needing to double check with particular things. The actress who actually played Emily, Miss Jennifer Carper, was very good to see because of the case of, again, being the specific person being possessed and the specific things sort of run through. It can be very tricky for getting the appropriate reactions or certain sort of things that are done for certain things like that. And in a couple particular circumstances, it's kind of the case of they have the case of either CGI or other methods to do it. But there were the one or two other methods that they still kept it the actual actor doing the actions themselves in certain cases. And it was definitely intriguing to see.
Yeah, she does a really good job in this role because it's like it's got to be a this had to have been a bitch of a role because it's like you said, it's very physical and it's physical in like a way that you as a performer you wouldn't normally have to do,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you have to do all these like crazy like movements and stuff. Yeah, she does a great job of both being possessed and of also just being this, as far as we know, just this like very sweet college girl who Like she kind of has to play both of those roles, and it's a really good performance. So, um, this isn't. I guess okay. So I don't know if this is. I guess it's a horror film, but it's also kind of not. It's kind of like a mix. It's a mix of like a horror movie with like a legal drama, which I kind of really like.
I can
And
see that since it's the basis of the story of what's kind of happening about the story within it to mesh with all the particular sorts of things. And yeah, especially with the two genres, they kind of meet nicely in the middle to work with particular sorts of things.
yeah, they do a very good job of kind of blending them in a way that still, it still has its scary moments, but it also still feels grounded in reality.
hmm I think one of the particular things, especially with this, is it somewhat works because the basis of it being within a trial and discussing about these particular sorts of events, it has to stay maybe a little bit more on the realistic slash um, discussative side of things, where it can show the flashbacks of the exorcism happening and other sorts of stuff going on, but still having the one or two other flashbacks showing more realistic or um, non religious sort of things that happen with that sort of stuff. Where, especially with horror, it can fly into several crazy, irid- crazy sort of things just to mess with the genre itself. And I suppose with this, you couldn't really dodge that much of the idea, but it's one of the particular things that people would have been like, I was expecting an actual horror film. What the heck is this?
Yeah, I think you're right though. With it being set, like having the idea of the trial being like part of it does kind of force, as a writer, would force you to be like, okay, we can't go too far with any of the demon stuff because it has to still like be believable. Because you kind of have to balance where you have to balance so that the audience is constantly guessing like, did this person, like, did the priest, was he neglectful or was he actually casting out a demon? And that's kind of like the central tension in the film.
And I think the film kind of says it best with the main lead speaking at the end of the trial, being like, "We're discussing about facts, and there's not a lot of specific facts within the trial, just sort of last little discussions of things. But case of what do you believe with things with the case that they explained from there." And I think it was one of the biggest things that with how much she had to work with and what she was kind of asked to do, yeah, there was no way that she was going to get through without a guilty verdict. But her speech did a decent lot of stating the actual facts of the case.
Yeah, yeah. And it's so if you don't know, this movie is loosely based off of a real story about Annalise Michelle, I think was her name, who ended up dying of malnutrition when she was being given, I believe, like 60 something exorcisms, which probably should be giving people medical care if you have to quote unquote exorcise 67 demons from them. Probably probably more of an issue of mental health at that point, but whatever.
Yeah. And again, I think it was one of the particular cases within the film to either cover it a bit and at least sort of keep a case of it. There was a doctor within the case that helped out the priest with the exorcism and
Yes.
whatnot. So that did not end up well for the doctor. So sorry for him.
No, and also in the real case, the priest did he was found guilty, but they did give him a 3-year suspended sentence, which is kind of like, yeah, you probably didn't do the right thing, but we also don't want to put you in jail.
Well, I suppose depending, like there could have been supposed other things with stuff, but whether or not it was discovered enough to actually place any sort of charges on thing, don't know the whole story.
No, but he was convicted of negligent homicide. but it was a suspended
Yeah.
sentence, so it's basically like, don't fuck up again and you won't go to jail.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I thought it's a very good movie. I really think that if you're not super big into horror, but you kind of want to dip your toe, this might be kind of a good starting-ish point.
I'd say so. Again, kind of depending on how far with certain sorts of people. Like in some particular places of people I know, it's hardly much of anything. You have to start with the kiddie sort of stuff because maybe even with this, it probably won't be enough, but probably closer to the range in comparison to the other stuff that's out there.
Yeah, I feel like it's pretty mild. Like there's nothing. I'm trying to. There's nothing like super crazy in this though.
Hmm.
Like there's obviously there's some like gross shit because it's a movie about an exorcism, but I don't feel like they ever go super far. Like they do a pretty good
Definitely
job, I
true.
think, of not being too gruesome.
Yeah, that's true. And it's especially kind of a way, especially with horror, that one of the particular pillars of horror is that it goes into the disgusting and or shock horror sort of stuff. And no matter what, most films either have to touch their toe into sort of things like that. But yeah, it can definitely be a bit hard to see, even on the lighter scale of things.
Yes. Alrighty. So for next week, we are going to do a film that I don't want to say it's related, but I don't feel like it's a million miles away.
Hmm.
Are you familiar with the films of James Wan?
Doesn't immediately ring a bell.
Okay. You might not know his name, but him and Lee Winnell were the creators of the Saw franchise.
Um.
Uh,
Hmm.
I think you've seen the first Saw, right?
I wouldn't be surprised, but it's nothing that I can specifically recall.
Okay. Don't worry, we're not doing any of the Saw movies. I'm not a huge fan of them outside of like the first one or two.
Hmm.
But we are going to be doing one of the other big franchises that he is responsible for. Uh, the film for next week is The Conjuring.
Okay.
Are you familiar with The Conjuring at all?
Again, the name rings a bell, but
Okay, so just a brief kind of uh, uh, premise. It's a 2013 supernatural horror film, and it is inspired by the Amityville Horror. I don't know if you're familiar with the Amityville Horror or the Warrens.
no, not with those ones.
Okay, so just to give you a bit of to get you a little bit up to date, the Amityville Horror basically about a haunted house. This movie also about a haunted house. Ed and Lorraine Warren were demonologists who investigated a bunch of supernatural nonsense. They were most likely frauds, and they wrote a bunch of books and had like their own like occult museum and stuff.
Hmm.
So this movie is about a fictionalized account of one of their cases.
Okay.
Yes, and I think you'll like it. I think you'll like it. It takes place primarily in the '70s, so we're gonna get some amazing '70s fashion as well.
Okay, with that. The one particular thing, silly little thought that crossed my mind with the particular films that we've run through. This is number two for having weird shaped trees.
Oh yeah, well, yeah. What was the other one?
No, it was the last one with the Exorcism of Emily.
Oh yeah, there's a tree in the poster for that one. Yeah, right.
Yeah, and again, not much of a thing, but just the aesthetic of it. It's like, this is time number two. If there's a third one, I might have to bring up some concerns.
This was not a planned thing.
Duly noted,
uh,
but just know if a third does show up, I'm gonna bring it up.
I expect you to. So that is going to be it for this week. I've been Paul.
And I've been Dave.